Leukemia Lymphoma Society Registry was actually conceived in 2018. It was intended to follow long-term side effects. When the vaccines from COVID were emergency authorized, we used the registry to actually enroll patients to find out what their response was to COVID vaccinations. When the registry actually opened, which was about February or March of 2020, we had thousands of patients rapidly enroll. And the way we did it was we offered patients a free lab test to ask what their anti-spike levels were. And the anti-spike levels are what the antibodies produced in response to the vaccination. What we found was that about 25% of the patients actually were not making any detectable anti-spike antibodies. And what that meant was they were potentially not protected. And remember that when COVID first started, the death rate in blood cancer patients due to COVID was astronomical, kind of like in the 25-35% range. So this was a pretty scary time for blood cancer patients, and in particular, patients with B-cell malignancies were among the worst in terms of producing anti-spike antibodies. So we now have 12,000 patients in the registry, all types of blood cancers. We have 1,000 myeloma patients, 2,500 CLL patients, really big numbers. And what it's done is it's enabled us to actually look at disease subtypes, response to vaccinations, and to fractionate those with large numbers of patients. We rapidly published on this, and I must tell you that the response to the registry was so quick and robust, it allowed us to get the information out to physicians, to patients, and I will tell you that the patients knew whether they were making antibodies at the same time we got the information back. So it was a free lab test where the patient actually had information that they could utilize and go back to their physicians. How did we do this, and how did we get such rapid enrollment? Clearly, providing a free lab test was high incentive in a time of when the COVID vaccines were just started, in addition to which there was virtually no patients in the FDA authorization data to initially allow the vaccines to go forward who had blood cancer patients. So this was a totally unknown question. And the registry was exceptionally useful in rapidly producing information, which we published in multiple times. We also have expanded the registry not only to look at the anti-spike response, but also the T-cell response. And patients and physicians have to understand that it's not only the B cells, but it's also the T cells that can mediate protection. So we published on that as well. We sent out initially, in the opening of the registry, 600,000 emails to all our constituents within LLS. And remember that LLS has been in business for 70 years. We have a wide constituency of patients, caretakers, physicians, just a tremendous wide variety of patients and people who might have this information and be willing to contribute. We have since, now that there are vaccines and the responses are well established, we've moved on to look at breakthrough infections. We've done this twice. We actually have a poster here at ASH looking at the breakthrough infections during the Omicron surge back in January. And what we saw was about 10% of the patients with blood cancer were getting breakthrough infections. We actually have repeated the survey in August of 2020, looking back over the previous 4 months. We had about 1,200 patients that got Evusheld, and we can pretty much say with confidence that at that point, that Evusheld was beginning, the virus was basically beginning to chip away at Evusheld, that it was not working as well, not nearly as well as the FDA authorization data. So it was a warning to patients and physicians that Evusheld may not be working as well. During this whole 2.5-year time, that the vaccines were changing, the vaccines were changing, the virus was changing. We know that blood cancer patients still remain at risk. So actually the monoclonal antibodies that were available with the current strains of BQ1.1, for example, it's not effective. And so that really leaves the antivirals to protect patients. This is really important for patients because especially patients who have not produced antibodies and might be at risk, they could get infections, have long-term infections, and need need to speak to physicians and contact physicians immediately so they can get help. It's been an unprecedented ride for LLS. We did not think this registry was going to have such immediate uptake, but we really stepped up, and LLS has contributed millions of dollars to make this happen, because we recognize for patients that this was a really important outcome to learn, are they responding to the vaccines? Going forward, now that we have 12,000 patients in the registry, of which, by the way, we have 6,000 electronic healthcare records, and that not only allows us to get information based upon what the patients reported, what disease they had, what treatments they had, what vaccines they had, when they had them, but also look at the records in terms of exactly what treatments did they get, and what was the sequence of events, and what was the outcomes. Those electronic healthcare records will allow us to do a much deeper dive to understand what the trajectory of patients is. And that's the path going forward, to go beyond COVID and use this large patient registry, which, by the way, we can go back to patients and ask questions. IRB allows us to do this, so we're unique in that we can see data in an electronic healthcare record or patient-reported outcome and go back and ask the patients things like, how financially able are you? Were you able to work? What is your concerns with COVID? And in addition to long-term outcomes, which the registry would have been able to do. And so we are getting ready to embark on studies using the registry beyond COVID, and use all the electronic means to pull all that data together and analyze it. We've been very fortunate. Not only did we go out, put information on our website and use email blasts to let patients know, but also this has been picked up by numerous media sources, which is really invaluable for LLS, because it's a way to get the information out to patients that we might have benefit. I should also tell you that LLS has three main pillars. Research, which is what I've done, a large patient access group, which can provide all sorts of resources for patients. And so the contact with the patients through the patient access is highly robust, and also advocating in Washington. And the CDC, for example, we were telling the CDC, as our data came out with COVID, what's going on with our patients in terms of their ability to respond to the vaccine or breakthrough infections.